She was a tremendous life, unbelievable energy. She threw parties and she had people over, and she always made dinners for anybody who was sick, and she got involved in every campfire girl, Boy Scout.
She was very capable, smart, giving, dedicated to her children, dedicated to me.
And I kept saying, Mom, what's wrong? What hurts? And she says, my abdomen. And she was miserable. And we said, well, please call a doctor. She needs to be examined. We asked him 3 times.
The nurse said they'd call the doctors. The doctors were aware of the problem, but the unfortunate part about it is the doctors never showed up.
And that's when I reached down and hugged her, and I said, we're here. And she opened her eyes. And that's the last time she opened her eyes. And I still thought she wasn't going to die. I still thought they were going to fix her. David said, something really went wrong. I think she was neglected. And I just couldn't believe it.
Something that could have been and should have been taken care of was not.
Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in medical injustice Diane Stewart's story to reveal for the very first time how the Stewart's attorney, Chris Dolan, at the Dolan law firm, successfully fought for the truth and discovered 3 critical pieces of information buried deep within Diane Stewart's medical records. Critical information that some of the staff at Stanford Hospital deliberately withheld, claiming it could not be located. The Stewart family deserved to know why their mother died. And ultimately, after months of legal fighting to get to the truth and encountering at every turn a medical code of silence, with the doctors continually saying, I don't remember and I don't recall, to almost every question, Chris Dolan finally got the truth, and it was very clear that some of these doctors and nurses at Stanford Hospital failed miserably to monitor Diane Stewart's life-threatening condition, which resulted in her unnecessary and untimely death. Chris promised the family that as the then president of the Consumer Attorneys of California, he'd do everything possible to help protect all patients in the future from these same kinds of preventable and deadly mistakes. And so he helped draft and sponsor new legislation, Senate Bill 850, Electronic Health Records, which is the first of its type in the United States that protects electronic medical records from deletion and alteration. What does it do? It protects the accuracy and integrity of electronic medical information by requiring electronic medical record systems to automatically record and preserve changes made to a patient's electronic medical record. This bill is now leading a national change, preserving electronic medical records. And it's a critical and necessary policy as we move towards a paperless system where our medical history will exist only as bits of data that can be erased, manipulated, etc. Senate Bill 850 is groundbreaking. Most lawyers won't represent folks like the Stewarts in medical malpractice cases in California because of a little-known law passed in 1976 and signed by the then Governor Jerry Brown. It's called MICRA, the Medical Injury Compensation Reform Act, which prevents justice to a large group of California citizens by limiting or capping a maximum potential recovery in certain med-mal cases. It's no secret that the insurance companies and the American Medical Association heavily promoted this MICRA with blatant lies spread through the media. Despite that, Chris Dolan took on this case when no one else would. and not only got justice for the Stewart family, but set a new standard for doctors, nurses, and hospitals to live by, protecting us all. Chris Dolan has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in San Francisco, in California, and in the nation. His fellow lawyers have selected him Trial Lawyer of the Year by the Consumer Attorneys of California, Trial Lawyer of the Year by the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association, California Lawyer Attorney of the Year, the Clay Award, and President of the Consumer Attorneys of California. Chris is driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. His goals, not only to get justice for his clients, but also to set a higher standard to protect us all. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from San Francisco. It is my great pleasure to introduce Chris Dolan to the show. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your law practice. What kind of people do you represent?
The people I represent are the people who walk by my front door. They're the people who come to work every day. They can be the folks who are digging the foundation of a building or being all the way up on the top floor. So we represent people in need.
Today we're going to be talking about a family that you represented. And we're going to be talking about their mother and wife, Diane Stewart. Tell us, our audience, a little bit about who Diane Stewart was.
Well, Diane Stewart was a wife and a mother. She had lovely children, and she had gotten to the place where her husband was retired and they were supposed to be spending the golden years of their life. So she had her knees replaced so that she could be more actively engaged with her husband and with her children and her grandchildren.
Which is what a lot of people do. It's a simple, not simple, but it's a normal, ordinary operation, isn't it?
It's an operation that is supposed to enhance your life. It's an operation that shouldn't be life-threatening, and it's certainly one that shouldn't have resulted in her death.
She went to a well-respected hospital, Stanford, right?
Her family actually used their savings to send her to what they thought was the best hospital.
What happened?
Well, what happened is she had the bilateral knee replacement, and that went fine.
Right.
And then she was admitted to the orthopedic ward over the weekend. And over the weekend, the only people on staff were the residents, who in essence are the medical students in the final years of their training.
Right.
And she was in pain, and the pain got worse, and it was a 10 out of a 10 in her abdomen. And her family was there, and they asked the nurses to get them a doctor. And the nurse called the doctor, and the doctor on call didn't come in and just gave more pain medicine. And in essence ignored her as she got worse and worse. And the interesting thing about Diane Stewart is her son's a doctor. And her son was telling the family what to do, but the doctors wouldn't respond.
And nobody came, did they?
The nurses tried to help her.
Yeah.
The nurses tried to free up her bowel, which is what the problem was, is that she had an infarcted bowel. It had turned, and so that her bowel was dying. And the nurses gave what the doctors ordered, which was just more pain medicine. And aside from that, they stopped monitoring her. That was part of the problem, is that the nurses were supposed to monitor her input and her output of fluids, and they didn't. And so the things that were saying she was dying were not responded to by the doctors and were not recorded by the nurses.
You took this case. Nobody else would take this case. Why?
This case was extremely difficult because the records were all electronic records. And the records didn't appear to be all there. And it took hours and hours and hours of looking through these records with her son, the doctor, and demanding that they provide us more records. And we finally found out that they had deleted an electronic record. So trying to prove a case on facts that have been deleted by the doctors is near impossible.
How did you find out that they had deleted, I think it was 3 critical pieces of information, right?
Well, we kept pushing and pushing until they finally...
and for our audience, when you say pushing and pushing, you're subpoenaing the information, right?
We subpoena the information, we file motions to compel. We try to seek sanctions if they don't produce it, and we just keep demanding it and not give up, and then bring in the people who actually wrote the records,
Right.
and finally got them to admit that the records of that evening, the critical records,
Yeah.
pink, had been deleted.
Yeah. So the people who you brought in stated that they had written certain things that weren't there, correct?
There was a nurse, Nurse Gulapa, who was a nurse on the critical night in question, was trying to get the doctors to come in, and she had made a note saying, I called the doctor,
Yeah.
I've done these things, she's getting worse. And that note, which was the critical piece of evidence,
Right.
was deleted from the electronic medical record.
It must take a lot of courage for a nurse to come forward with this information because she knows the repercussions.
She didn't come forward.
You
She
dis-
didn't come forward. I had to pull her in, put her
Yeah.
under oath,
Yeah.
and demand that she tell us. And they were beating around the bush
Yeah.
until finally I showed that she had done a late entry, and I said, where is the original one?
Mm-hmm.
And why was it deleted? And she said it was deleted. She didn't know why. And then she said this thing that was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
That the nursing staff said to her, is there anything else you want to change in this record, to alter the electronic record?
Right.
Which is scary because all our records are moving electronically now. And if they can be altered or deleted, then our history can be erased.
Tell us then, what is the significance of this case other than getting justice?
Well, this case was also complicated because Diane Stewart was an elderly woman.
Yes.
In the law in the state of California on medical negligence cases, puts a limit on the value of that life because she's not working.
Yeah.
So it's arbitrarily placed a value on her life of $250,000.
And for our audience to understand that, there are two types of claims, if you will. One is an economic one, and one is a non-economic one. And the one you just spoke about is the non-economic maximum amount of money under California law, which is the MICRA law.
Let's make this real. This
Yeah.
is, and we can use words like economic and non-economic. Economic is damage to your pocket.
Right.
Non-economic is who a person is, the value of their life.
Pain and suffering.
Well, more than that, in a
Yeah.
death case, it's my mother.
Yeah.
This is who my mother was. This is who she meant to me.
Yes.
This is the loss that I have suffered. It's not just pain and suffering. When somebody dies, it's the whole that's left behind.
Yeah. And that's capped out at $250,000.
Yeah, it's been that way since 1976. The
So-
price of gas has gone up, but apparently not the value of a human life.
Yeah. So folks who are not working, folks that don't have any economic income, they don't have a salary, a business, something like that, they're kind of out of luck, aren't they? In the state of California.
The most vulnerable in our society are the most devalued by this law. Children,
Yeah.
they're not working, so
Yeah.
they're considered to be worth less.
Right.
Older people and disabled, people who don't have jobs where they've suffered economic loss, this legal system imposed by the doctors' lobby has decreased the value of their life.
Yeah, now I just want to talk a little bit about what MICRA claims, the positive impact and how you respond to this. MICRA, proponents of MICRA, they claim, which is Medical Injury Compensation Reform Act, passed in 1975, signed by our then Governor Jerry Brown, our current Governor Jerry Brown, a Democrat. Unbelievable, but they claim that it has increased patients' access to health care by keeping doctors, nurses, and other health care providers in practice in hospitals and clinics open. What do you have to say to that?
That's a farce. That's a front for profit. What we have seen, because we've done the statistical analysis,
Yeah.
the Consumer Attorneys of California, of which I was present,
Yeah.
it conducted a study of the profits of insurance companies, and those profits have skyrocketed. It's not access to patient health care. Where that comes from is the government being able to fund clinics,
Yeah.
and it comes from insurance companies paying doctors a reasonable rate. So what we've actually seen here is a squeeze. The insurance companies are saying, we don't have to pay you if we kill you. And then they've said to the doctors, who now are waking up, we're capping how much you can make.
Right.
So if doctors are not being able to have enough money to encourage them to go into healthcare, it's not because of medical negligence cases, which are less than 2%
Right.
of overall healthcare costs. It's because the insurance companies are ripping them off, as well as the families who are
Yeah.
having people die.
Now, proponents of MICRA also say that California has some of the lowest malpractice premiums in the country. Is that true?
Well, sure. I mean, I'd have the lowest car premium too if I ran somebody over and I only had to pay $15,000.
Right.
That's the most I'm going to have to spend, so your premiums are going down. But the farce on that one, which is an absolute ruse, is that those malpractice rates are not out of sync with the rest of the country.
Right.
But what has really changed is that California has some of the highest profitability for medical health care insurers.
Right. They also claim that patients now receive the lion's share of settlements and awards, not the trial lawyers.
So let me get this straight. If MICRA gives you the tail
Yeah.
of the lion,
Yeah.
all right, and then you're saying that the awards, the majority of it goes to the client, that's not correct, because you know what these doctors and their insurance companies do? They drive up the costs of proving these cases where you
Yeah.
have to hire medical experts.
Right.
And there is no lion's share left. At the end of the day, there may be the hair on the tail because the money is being kept with the insurance companies rather than going to the families.
Yeah.
And lawyers, they can't take these cases economically.
Yeah. And a lot of them don't, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on this case, because you did take it, because there was another issue at hand, which you, as the then president of the Consumer Attorneys of California, made a promise to the family, right, that never in the future would patients suffer the same sort of experience that the Stewart family experienced if a certain type of new Senate bill was passed and eventually approved. Tell us what that was.
When you sit across from a family, you look into the eyes of someone who's desperate for hope. They'd been to 8 or 9 lawyers who couldn't help them because of this law.
Yeah.
And I looked at this family who was pleading for assistance, and I made them a promise. I said, we're going to find out why your mom died. I said, you deserve that. And I said, moreover, if they've messed with these records, I will do everything in my power to make sure that it doesn't happen to anyone else.
Yes.
Because the world is changing. Everything's electronic.
Yes.
It's no longer in handwriting that you can check to see if it's been crossed out. If it disappears into the ether on the computer, how will you ever know? So I not only handled this case, but I helped draft a law that Senator Leno agreed to carry, that I and the family testified about up in the legislature, and we pursued this until SB 850 was passed,
Right.
which is the first of its kind in the country that says if someone alters or changes a medical record, they cannot remove the original content, and they have to put down their name, the date, and the time, so we can find out who's messing with these records.
This is the law in California, and it's also leading the charge across the country, isn't it?
It's been the law in the state of California now for 45 days.
That's what I admire about what you did. You not only won this case, but you did something about it.
Well, being a lawyer is an amazing thing. And having the ability to make change is a very powerful thing. It's not about pursuing money, it's about pursuing justice. And in this case, it wasn't just about the Stewart family. They were willing to be the ones who went through all of this so that change could be made, and this change will sweep across the country. It already is.
Yeah.
And it will hopefully prevent the falsification of medical records from now forward as we move into an electronic age.
A lot of people don't realize this, but there are a very few number of lawyers who actually want to make the system better. Not only do they win their cases on behalf of their clients, but like in this Senate Bill 850, where you move forward, nobody was paying you to do this. You move forward because you didn't want to see injustices happen to other people. And we really admire you for that. That's why we're here today.
Well, thank you very much. This was not a case about profit. This was a case about people. And when you say a lot of lawyers don't do it, well, a lot of them are working for corporations.
Yes.
They're not really
Those are the
interested
ones I'm talking
in
about.
making change.
Yeah.
They're interested in keeping change for their clients.
Right. Chris, let me ask you this one last question. What is it that motivates you to take a case where there's no profit?
Well, I think that every lawyer who has gone to law school, who's got a heart, was inspired at some time. And you look back at these movies like Philadelphia, The Verdict, the movies where Silkwood, where the little guy won over the injustice. And really that's what motivated me to become a lawyer. And so I do that. I live the reality of those movies. I live the reality of change, and it is tremendously gratifying to see that you are not living in a movie, but in reality, you're making a difference. And that, I gotta tell you, that's That is just amazing. When I win these unwinnable cases,
Yeah.
it is a point in my life that's up there with my marriage and the birth of my kids, because
Yeah.
what I have done is something that no one else could do, and those families look at you and they're grateful.
And how do you, like, do you go off in the corner someplace a little later and say, just feel that win?
Well, it's interesting, but every time before a verdict comes in, when
Yeah.
I hear the verdict's in, there's a gap. And I just say, let God's will be done.
Yes.
And when it comes back and you win, sometimes they're just tears that stream down your eyes, because at that point, I've given it my all.
Yeah.
And I've looked at that family and I say, I can't tell you whether we're going to win or lose, but I hope you feel that I cared enough to give you my all. And when you win, you have faith. You have that little bit of faith that despite all this political rhetoric and despite all the money involved, those 12 people, they got it right.
I'm glad that there are lawyers like you, because setting aside whether you make any money or not, you got to do the right thing for justice, and you're in a position where you can do that. So I want to thank you very much for being on the program, and I want to thank you for being the kind of lawyer you are.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.